Marcus Johnson took a deep breath as he entered courtroom 4B at the county courthouse. The large room with its wooden benches, high ceilings, and American flag looked the same as any other courtroom, but today it felt different. Today, Marcus would fight a simple parking ticket that he knew was unfair. At 34 years old, Marcus had built a good life for himself. He worked as a software engineer at a respected tech company, owned a small but comfortable home, and was known in his community as someone who always helped others. He had never been in trouble with the law. His parents had raised him to be respectful and follow the rules. Case number 247, Johnson versus City of Westfield, called out the court clerk in a bored voice. Marcus walked forward to the defendant's table. His evidence was ready in a neat folder. Photos showing the no parking sign had been completely hidden by tree branches. Anyone would have missed it. He felt confident but nervous. Judge Patricia Harmon looked down at him from her bench. She was in her late 50s with graying hair pulled back tightly and small glasses perched on her nose. Her face showed no emotion as Marcus approached. "State your name for the record," she said coldly. "Marcus Johnson, Your Honor." Judge Harmon glanced at the papers in front of her, then back at Marcus with a look that made him feel instantly uncomfortable. "Another parking violation, Mr. Johnson. I see this isn't your first time in this courtroom." Marcus was confused. "Actually, Your Honor, this is my first time ever receiving a ticket or being in court." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's not what my records indicate. You people often have trouble keeping track of these things." A few people in the courtroom shifted uncomfortably. The court reporter, a young black woman named Aisha Thomas, paused her typing for a moment, looking up with surprise. "Your Honor, there must be some mistake in your records. I've never—" "Don't interrupt me, Mr. Johnson," Judge Harmon snapped. "Do you understand the charge against you, or do I need to explain it in simpler terms?" Marcus felt heat rising to his face, but kept his voice steady. "I understand the charge, Your Honor. I have evidence that the sign was not visible due to—" "I doubt your evidence will change anything," Judge Harmon cut in. "In my experience, people from your neighborhood always have excuses." The bailiff, Officer Rodriguez, looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Other people waiting for their cases watched with wide eyes. Marcus noticed the small red light on his phone, which was recording the hearing as allowed by state law. He continued calmly, "Your Honor, I'd like to present my evidence if the court allows." "Fine, proceed," Judge Harmon said with a dismissive wave. "Then make it quick. I have actual important cases after this." As Marcus opened his folder and began to show his photos, Judge Harmon leaned toward her microphone, but didn't turn it off. She spoke in a low voice to the clerk beside her. "Why do they always waste my time like this? They never learn." The microphone carried her words clearly through the courtroom. Several people gasped quietly. Marcus kept his focus on his evidence, his hand steady despite his growing anger. Little did Judge Harmon know that her words were being recorded clearly, and that in just a few minutes, her behavior would lead to consequences she never expected. Marcus Johnson continued presenting his evidence with remarkable calm despite Judge Harmon's obvious hostility. He placed 3 clear photos on the document camera that projected them onto the courtroom screen. "As you can see, Your Honor, in this first photo taken on May 3rd, the no parking sign is completely covered by tree branches. The second photo shows my car parked in the spot, and the third shows the ticket on my windshield." Judge Harmon barely glanced at the screen. Instead, she stared directly at Marcus with cold eyes. "Mr. Johnson, are you suggesting the city is responsible for your inability to find proper parking? Those branches don't grow overnight." Marcus took a slow breath. "No, Your Honor. I'm simply showing that the sign wasn't visible to any driver. In fact, 5 other cars received tickets that same day." Something in Marcus's confident manner seemed to irritate Judge Harmon further. She tapped her pen against her desk impatiently. "Let me guess, Mr. Johnson. You think you're special because you have a fancy job and nice clothes. The law applies to everyone, regardless of how important you think you are." The courtroom had grown very quiet. Everyone could feel the tension building. Aisha Thomas, the court reporter, typed every word while keeping her eyes down. She had seen Judge Harmon treat people rudely before, but never this blatantly. Officer Rodriguez, the bailiff who had been standing quietly against the wall, shifted his weight uncomfortably. His eyes darted between the judge and Marcus. Marcus, despite feeling his heart pound, maintained his composure. Few people knew that before becoming a software engineer, he had completed law school but chose a different career path. He understood courtroom procedure well enough to know that Judge Harmon's behavior was completely inappropriate. Your Honor, I'm simply presenting evidence relevant to my case. The city ordinance clearly states that traffic signs must be visible to be enforceable. Judge Harmon's face flushed slightly red. Are you telling me the law now, Mr. Johnson? I've been on this bench for 15 years. I don't need someone like you explaining the law to me. Marcus noticed a few people in the courtroom exchanging glances. An elderly white woman in the front row looked particularly troubled by the judge's tone. I apologize if it seemed that way, Your Honor, Marcus said respectfully. I'm only trying to present all relevant facts. Judge Harmon leaned forward, her voice dropping to a dangerous level. Facts. Let me tell you some facts, Mr. Johnson. Fact 1, you parked illegally. Fact 2, you're wasting this court's time with excuses. And fact 3, in my courtroom, I make the decisions. As she spoke, Marcus noticed she had left her microphone on again. He also noticed his phone was still recording everything perfectly. In that moment, Marcus made a decision. He would not react emotionally. He would not give Judge Harmon any reason to escalate further. Instead, he would let her words speak for themselves. I understand, Your Honor, he said simply. Judge Harmon seemed disappointed by his calm response. She had clearly expected, perhaps even wanted, him to lose his temper. Fine, the court finds you guilty of illegal parking. The fine is $250, the maximum penalty. Next case. As Marcus gathered his evidence, Judge Harmon muttered into her still active microphone, that should teach him to know his place. Several gasps sounded through the courtroom. Officer Rodriguez looked at the ceiling, clearly troubled by what he was hearing. Aisha's fingers froze over her keyboard for a moment before she continued typing. Marcus nodded respectfully to the court, tucked his folder under his arm, and walked toward the exit. His face revealed nothing, but his mind was working quickly. What Judge Harmon didn't know was that Marcus wasn't defeated. He was simply moving to his next step, and it would happen faster than anyone expected. Marcus stepped out of courtroom 4B with his heart still racing. The heavy wooden door closed behind him with a soft thud, muffling the sound of the next case being called. For a moment, he stood alone in the wide courthouse hallway, processing what had just happened. He pulled out his phone and stopped the recording. Then he played back the last few minutes, listening through his earbuds. Judge Harmon's voice came through with perfect clarity. That should teach him to know his place. A mixture of emotions washed over Marcus, anger, disappointment, and a deep sense of injustice. But there was something else too, determination. Two women walked past, glancing at him with sympathetic eyes. They had been in the courtroom during his case. One of them, an older woman with silver hair, paused briefly. That wasn't right in there, young man, she said softly. I've never seen anything like it. Marcus nodded. Thank you for saying that. As the women continued down the hall, Marcus leaned against the wall and considered his options. He could post the recording online and let social media do its work. He could file a formal complaint that might be addressed weeks or months later, or he could do something more immediate. Marcus remembered something important. During law school, he had done a summer internship in this very courthouse. He knew its layout well, and he knew that on the third floor, just 2 flights up from where he stood now, was the office of the Judicial Ethics Committee. Making his decision, Marcus headed for the elevator. As he waited, he noticed Aisha Thomas, the court reporter from Judge Harmon's courtroom, stepping out of a side door. Their eyes met briefly. She looked troubled. Excuse me, Marcus said, approaching her. You're the court reporter from Judge Harmon's courtroom, right? Aisha nodded cautiously. Yes, I'm sorry about what happened in there. It's not your fault, Marcus assured her. But I could use your help. Would you be willing to confirm what happened if someone asks? I recorded everything, but having an official witness would help. Aisha looked nervous. I could lose my job. Only if what I'm saying isn't true, Marcus replied gently. Is it true? Aisha took a deep breath. It's all in my transcript, word for word. I've worked in courts for 6 years, and I'd never heard a judge speak to anyone like that. She paused. What are you going to do? The elevator arrived with a soft ding. Marcus stepped in and held the door. I'm going to the Judicial Ethics Committee, right now. Aisha's eyes widened. They might not take it seriously. Complaints against judges can take months to process. This won't be just a complaint, Marcus said. They'll hear exactly what happened, in Judge Harmon's own words. He hesitated. If they ask for a witness? Aisha straightened her shoulders. I'll tell the truth. That's my job. Marcus nodded gratefully as the elevator doors began to close. As he rode up to the third floor, he reviewed the recording once more, making sure the key moments were easy to find. Judge Harmon's voice echoed in his ears. Why do they always waste my time like this? And that should teach him to know his place. The elevator doors opened to reveal a long hallway with various official-looking doors. At the far end, a frosted glass door bore the words, Judicial Ethics Committee, in gold lettering. Marcus walked purposefully toward it, the recording secure in his phone. He knew that what he was about to do could have serious consequences, not just for Judge Harmon, but potentially for himself as well. Taking on a judge was no small matter. But as he reached for the door handle, Marcus thought about the next person who would stand before Judge Harmon, someone who might not have the advantage of legal education or the confidence to stand their ground. That thought gave him all the courage he needed. He opened the door and stepped inside, ready to change the course of justice in just a few minutes. The Judicial Ethics Committee office was smaller than Marcus had expected. A reception desk stood in front of two closed doors, and the walls were lined with framed photos of judges and legal documents. The air smelled of old books and coffee. A woman in her mid-40s looked up from her computer as Marcus entered. Her nameplate read Susan Miller, administrative assistant. Can I help you? She asked, her voice professional but warm. I need to speak with someone about a serious judicial conduct violation that just happened, Marcus said, keeping his voice steady. It's urgent. Susan's expression shifted slightly. She'd heard people claim urgency before, but something in Marcus's calm demeanor caught her attention. Do you have an appointment? Director Wilson doesn't usually take walk-ins. I don't have an appointment, but this can't wait, Marcus explained. I just came from Judge Harmon's courtroom, where she made several racist comments on the record. I have it all recorded, which is legal in this jurisdiction. Susan's eyes widened slightly. Just a moment, she said, picking up her phone. She spoke quietly into the receiver, glancing at Marcus occasionally. While waiting, Marcus heard footsteps in the hallway. He turned to see Officer Rodriguez, the bailiff from Judge Harmon's courtroom, entering the office. Their eyes met in mutual surprise. Mr. Johnson, the officer said with a slight nod. I didn't expect to see you here. Officer Rodriguez, Marcus replied cautiously. Are you here about Judge Harmon too? The bailiff looked uncomfortable. I've worked in her courtroom for 3 years. What happened today wasn't the first time, but it was the worst. He lowered his voice. I tried reporting smaller incidents before, but nothing ever happened. Before they could continue their conversation, one of the office doors opened. A tall black man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and glasses emerged. I'm James Wilson, director of the Judicial Ethics Committee, he said, extending his hand to Marcus. Susan tells me you have a recording of Judge Harmon making inappropriate comments in court today. Yes, sir, Marcus replied, shaking his hand. And Officer Rodriguez was there as a witness. Wilson looked at the bailiff with surprise. This is unusual, to have both a recording and a court officer coming forward simultaneously. He gestured toward his office. Please, both of you, come in. Wilson's office was neat and organized, with law books lining the walls and a large computer screen on his desk. He motioned for them to sit in the chairs facing him. I should explain that I'm not just an upset citizen, Marcus said. I completed law school before choosing a different career path. I understand court procedures and know that what happened today violated judicial standards. Wilson nodded thoughtfully. That's helpful context. Can I hear the recording? Marcus connected his phone to the computer as directed, and soon Judge Harmon's voice filled the room. Wilson's expression grew increasingly grave as he listened to the judge's comments, the dismissal of evidence, and finally her muttered remarks about teaching him to know his place. When the recording ended, Wilson removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. This is extremely troubling. It's exactly how it happened. Officer Rodriguez confirmed. And the court reporter, Aisha Thomas, captured everything in the official transcript. Wilson turned to his computer and typed rapidly. Judge Harmon has had 3 previous complaints filed against her in the last 2 years, but none with this level of evidence. He looked up at Marcus. What did you hope would happen by bringing this to us today? Marcus met his gaze directly. Justice. Not just for me, but for anyone else who might face her in that courtroom. No judge should be allowed to bring their prejudices onto the bench. Wilson nodded gravely. You're right about that. He reached for his phone. And you won't have to wait long to see action taken. This recording changes everything. As Wilson dialed, Marcus realized that the 7 minutes he had spent walking to this office might change the course of many lives, including his own. James Wilson's phone call was brief but intense. Marcus and Officer Rodriguez sat quietly as the ethics director spoke in a firm, professional tone. Chief Judge Morales, I need your immediate detention on a matter of serious judicial misconduct, Wilson began. He played a short clip of the recording over the phone. Even from across the desk, Marcus could hear the sharp intake of breath from the chief judge. Yes, that's Judge Harmon. The recording was made legally in open court, Wilson confirmed. I have the complainant and the courtroom bailiff with me now, and the court reporter can verify the transcript. He paused, listening. Yes, sir, I agree completely. Wilson ended the call and looked at Marcus and Officer Rodriguez with a serious expression. Chief Judge Morales is taking this very seriously. He's calling an emergency meeting of the senior judicial panel right now. They're already in the building for a scheduled meeting. Marcus leaned forward. What happens next? Justice moves slowly most of the time, Wilson said, standing up. But not today. Not with this level of evidence. A knock at the door interrupted them. Susan poked her head in. Director Wilson, Miss Thomas is here, the court reporter from Judge Harmon's courtroom. Aisha Thomas entered, still holding her stenography equipment. She looked nervous but determined. Miss Thomas, Wilson greeted her. Thank you for coming forward. I heard Officer Rodriguez was here, she explained. I finished transcribing the morning session and, well, I couldn't just go back to work like nothing happened. Wilson nodded. Your transcript will be important evidence. Can you confirm that this recording matches what you transcribed from Judge Harmon's courtroom this morning? Aisha listened to a portion of the recording and nodded firmly. Word for word. It's all in my official transcript. Wilson's phone rang again. After a brief conversation, he turned to the group. The chief judge wants all of us in conference room and immediately. The senior judicial panel is reviewing the evidence. As they walked down the hallway to the conference room, Marcus felt a strange mix of emotions. He had come seeking justice but hadn't expected things to move so quickly. Is this normal? He asked Wilson quietly. No, Wilson replied. But neither is what happened in that courtroom. The judiciary takes its reputation very seriously. One corrupt judge damages the whole system. The conference room was large, with a long wooden table where 5 serious-looking judges in black robes sat reviewing documents. Chief Judge Morales, a distinguished man in his 60s, stood as they entered. Mr. Johnson, he said, approaching Marcus. I want to personally apologize for your experience in our courthouse today. What you endured is unacceptable. Marcus hadn't expected this level of acknowledgement. Thank you, sir. We've reviewed the recording and are treating this with the utmost urgency. Chief Judge Morales continued. Judge Harmon has demonstrated behavior that violates the judicial code of conduct in multiple ways. One of the female judges at the table spoke up. We've also pulled Judge Harmon's case records for the past year. There appears to be a disturbing pattern in her sentencing decisions when it comes to defendants of color. Chief Judge Morales nodded grimly, which makes this not just a single incident of misconduct, but potentially a pattern of civil rights violations. He turned to a court officer standing by the door. Please have security escort Judge Harmon from her courtroom immediately. Her docket will be reassigned. And contact the district attorney's office. They need to be involved at this point. The officer nodded and left quickly. Marcus's eyes widened. You're removing her from the bench today. Effective immediately, Chief Judge Morales confirmed. and depending on what the full investigation reveals, she may face criminal charges for civil rights violations under color of authority. Wilson checked his watch. It's been exactly 7 minutes since you walked into my office, Mr. Johnson. He offered a small smile. Sometimes justice can be swift after all. Marcus felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. What had started as a simple parking ticket had turned into something much more significant, a chance to make real change in the system. The courthouse suddenly buzzed with activity. 2 security officers moved quickly down the hallway toward courtroom 4B, followed by a court administrator holding official papers. Marcus, Wilson, and the others watched from the conference room doorway as the small group disappeared around the corner. "Should we?" Marcus began, not sure what he was asking. Chief Judge Morales shook his head. "This part isn't a public spectacle, Mr. Johnson. Judge Harmon will be served with immediate suspension papers and escorted from the building." But Officer Rodriguez's radio crackled to life. "Rodriguez, are you in the building? We need assistance at courtroom 4B. Judge Harmon is refusing to comply." The bailiff looked at Chief Judge Morales, who nodded. "Go, we'll follow." As they hurried toward the courtroom, Marcus could hear raised voices echoing down the hallway. A small crowd of curious courthouse employees and visitors had already gathered outside courtroom 4B, whispering among themselves. The doors to the courtroom were open. Inside, Judge Harmon stood behind her bench, her face flushed with anger. She was shouting at the security officers who stood before her. "This is ridiculous. You cannot remove me from my own courtroom. I've served on this bench for 15 years. Her voice carried into the hallway. The court administrator, a nervous-looking man in a gray suit, held up the papers. "Judge Harmon, these are official orders from the chief judge. Your conduct to date has triggered an emergency suspension." "What conduct?" Judge Harmon demanded. She spotted Aisha standing in the back of the courtroom and pointed accusingly. "Was it you? Did you report me for something?" Before Aisha could respond, Chief Judge Morales entered the courtroom, his presence commanding immediate attention. The whispering in the hallway stopped. "Patricia," he said firmly, using Judge Harmon's first name. "This is not how a judge behaves. Please come down from the bench now." Judge Harmon's eyes darted around the room, landing on Marcus standing in the doorway. Her expression changed from anger to shock, then back to anger. "Him? This is about him?" she said in disbelief. "You're taking the word of a parking violator over a sitting judge." "We're taking the evidence as it stands," Chief Judge Morales replied calmly, "which includes recordings, witness statements, and your own words on the official court transcript." The courtroom had gone completely silent. The few people who had been waiting for their cases sat frozen, watching the scene unfold. "Recordings?" Judge Harmon repeated, her voice suddenly less certain. Marcus stepped forward slightly, and Judge Harmon's eyes locked onto him. "You recorded me? That's illegal," she shouted. "Actually," Wilson said, stepping beside Marcus, "recording in this courthouse is perfectly legal, as stated in the public notice posted at every entrance." One of the security officers moved closer to the bench. "Judge Harmon, please step down and come with us. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." For a moment, it seemed Judge Harmon might continue resisting, but then her shoulders sagged slightly. The reality of her situation was sinking in. "This is insane," she muttered, but began gathering her things. As she descended from the bench, she passed close to Marcus. "You have no idea who you're messing with," she said quietly. Officer Rodriguez stepped between them. "That's enough, Judge Harmon." A female security officer took Judge Harmon's arm. "Patricia Harmon, you're being removed from your position pending investigation. You're also being detained for questioning regarding civil rights violations under color of authority." The crowd in the hallway parted as Judge Harmon was led out. Some people stared in shock, while others quickly looked away. A few pulled out phones to record the unprecedented scene of a judge being escorted out of her own courtroom. Marcus stood quietly, feeling no satisfaction in watching Judge Harmon's humiliation. This wasn't about revenge for him. It was about justice and ensuring that no one else would suffer the same treatment he had experienced. As Judge Harmon disappeared down the hallway with her security escort, Chief Judge Morales approached Marcus. 7 minutes, he said quietly. Sometimes that's all it takes to begin changing a broken system. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters the next morning. News of Judge Harmon's removal had spread quickly through the city. Local TV vans with tall antennas lined the street, and journalists clutched microphones and notepads, eager for details. Marcus Johnson sat in his car across the street, watching the scene with mixed emotions. He had come to meet with the district attorney as requested, but he hadn't expected this media circus. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of his car and walked toward the courthouse. "There he is," someone shouted, and suddenly a wave of reporters rushed toward him. "Mr. Johnson, how does it feel to take down a sitting judge? Were you afraid of retaliation when you reported Judge Harmon? Do you think this is a sign of changing racial dynamics in our justice system?" The questions came from all directions. Marcus raised his hands, trying to create some space. "Please, I'm just here to meet with officials. I have no comment at this time." A courthouse security officer appeared at his side. "Mr. Johnson, the DA is waiting for you. Let me escort you inside." Grateful for the assistance, Marcus followed the officer through a side entrance, away from the press. Inside, the courthouse felt different today. People looked at him with curious eyes as he passed. Some nodded respectfully, while others whispered behind their hands. District Attorney Elena Vasquez welcomed Marcus into her office with a firm handshake. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, known for her tough stance on corruption. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Johnson," she said, gesturing to a chair. "I've reviewed all the evidence, including the recording and testimony from Officer Rodriguez and Ms. Thomas." "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Judge Harmon has been formally charged with civil rights violations and judicial misconduct," Dave Vasquez explained. "She spent the night in custody and was released on bail this morning. Her law license has been suspended pending the investigation." Marcus nodded slowly. "And my parking ticket?" Dave Vasquez almost smiled. "Dismissed, of course, along with 17 other cases from Judge Harmon's court that we've identified as potentially biased." She slid a folder across her desk. "Since your case broke, we've received 12 new complaints about Judge Harmon's conduct. People who felt they were treated unfairly because of their race, but didn't think anyone would believe them." Marcus opened the folder and scanned the statements. People described being mocked, rushed through proceedings, or given harsher penalties than others for similar offenses. "This is bigger than I thought," he said quietly. "It usually is," Dave Vasquez agreed. "One case exposes the pattern." She leaned forward. "The press is eager to talk to you. You're being called a hero." Marcus shook his head. "I'm not a hero. I just knew what was happening wasn't right, and I happen to know what to do about it." "That makes you exactly the kind of hero we need," the DA replied. "But you don't have to speak publicly if you don't want to." Marcus thought for a moment. "Actually, I think I should say something, not to celebrate Judge Harmon's downfall, but to encourage others to speak up when they see injustice." Later that afternoon, Marcus stood on the courthouse steps facing a forest of microphones. Cameras flashed as he began to speak. "What happened in that courtroom wasn't just about me," he said clearly. "It was about a system that sometimes fails the people it's meant to protect. I was fortunate to have the knowledge and resources to address the injustice I faced. Many people don't." Reporters shouted questions, but Marcus continued steadily. "I don't take any pleasure in Judge Harmon's situation. This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. Our justice system only works when everyone, from the person entering the courthouse to the judge on the bench, is held to the same standards." As Marcus finished his brief statement, a young black woman approached him cautiously. "Mr. Johnson, my brother has a case next week, after seeing what you did." Her voice trembled slightly. "You showed us that we can stand up for ourselves. Thank you." Marcus smiled gently. 7 minutes. Sometimes that's all it takes to start making a difference. 6 months had passed since that fateful day in courtroom 4B. The city had changed in small but important ways. The courthouse where it all happened looked the same from the outside, but inside, things were different. Marcus Johnson walked up the familiar steps, nodding to the security guard who recognized him immediately. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson," the guard said with respect. "Big day today." "Yes, it is," Marcus replied with a smile. The hallways were busy with the usual activity of a working courthouse: lawyers hurrying with files, citizens waiting nervously for their cases, court officers directing traffic. But as Marcus made his way to the third floor, he noticed new signs posted on every courtroom door. All proceedings in this court are recorded. If you witness judicial misconduct, report it to the Ethics Office, room 312. Outside a large conference room, Marcus paused to straighten his tie. Through the glass door, he could see about 30 people already seated inside. Taking a deep breath, he entered the room. "Here he is," Chief Judge Morales announced, gesturing for Marcus to join him at the front. "The man who reminded us all what courage looks like." The room broke into applause. Marcus nodded modestly as he took his place beside the chief judge. The audience included judges, lawyers, court staff, and community leaders. "Today marks the official launch of our court accountability program," Chief Judge Morales began, "and it's fitting that Marcus Johnson is here with us. His actions 6 months ago exposed problems that have been ignored for too long." On a screen behind them, photos appeared showing changes made since Judge Harmon's removal. New training programs for judges, a simplified complaint system, community oversight committees. As for former Judge Harmon, the chief judge continued, "She has pleaded guilty to civil rights violations and will never serve on the bench again. But today isn't about her. It's about building something better." Marcus looked out at the audience. He recognized Aisha Thomas and Officer Rodriguez sitting together. Both had received commendations for their honesty in coming forward. There were also faces he didn't know, people whose cases had been reviewed after Judge Harmon's removal, people who had finally received fair treatment. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he approached the podium with confidence. "When I walked into this courthouse with a simple parking ticket 6 months ago, I never imagined where it would lead," he began. "I was just one person facing an injustice, but I learned something important that day. One person speaking the truth can change an entire system." He gestured to a young woman in the front row. "This is Tanya Williams, who will be the first community justice advocate working in our courts. She'll help people who don't have legal training understand their rights and how to report problems." Tanya stood briefly as people applauded. Marcus continued, "The program we're launching today isn't just about catching bad judges. It's about making sure everyone who enters a courtroom is treated with dignity and fairness, regardless of their race, background, or education." After the ceremony, Marcus stood in the hallway receiving congratulations when Aisha approached him. "Remember when you asked if I would tell the truth about what happened in that courtroom?" she said. "I was so scared that day." "We all were," Marcus replied. "But you did it anyway," she said. "And now look at all this," she gestured around them. 17 judges have gone through the new training program. Every courtroom has clear reporting procedures posted. People actually believe that we heard now. Marcus smiled. 7 minutes changed my life. But what we've done together these past 6 months might change thousands of lives." As he left the courthouse that day, Marcus paused on the steps where he had once faced a crowd of reporters. Now he faced a future he never expected, not as a software engineer or even as a lawyer, but as someone who had found his true purpose in making the justice system live up to its name. Sometimes 7 minutes of courage is all it takes to begin a lifetime of change.